Welcome to the Virtual Center for the Study of the United States Constitution with your host, Dr. Bill O'Brien.
Good afternoon. This is Bill O'Brien, and welcome to our Wednesday edition of the Virtual Center for the Study of the United States Constitution. I am Bill O'Brien, and it is a pleasure to be with you on this beautiful summer day in the middle of July. It is the 17th day of July, and I welcome you to today's program. I invite you to participate actively in the program by making your voice heard and offering your opinions and your suggestions, your ideas, your comments on the issues of the day, on the conversation that is underway at the moment, or perhaps other issues that either we have raised or we should raise in our program. As much as possible, I would like to take the lead from our participants, from our listeners, whenever we are able. We have a phone number. The area code is 304, and the number is 658-3333. That's area code 304-658-3333. That will get you directly into our studios. And with a little spin of the dial, as it were. Actually, that's not it at all. It's a push of a button, I guess. But anyway, we will get you on the air, and look forward to hearing from you. And I'm sure that our other listeners equally look forward to hearing from you as well. Believe me, if you have something substantive to offer to the commentary, then for a moment, you should not be hesitant about throwing the idea out there. We've talked on and on and on about the marketplace of ideas. We talked about the Citizens United decision and Justice Roberts' rationalization for that decision based on the idea of the marketplace of ideas. And not only Justice Roberts' justification, but also Justice Kennedy's, who actually wrote the decision in Citizens United. And he made the point, that as we've mentioned in more than once before, that the whole idea of corporate rights to unlimited donations in political campaigns is not geared specifically towards the First Amendment right to free speech, even though the previous 1976 decision of Bellotti versus United States, in that decision, the Supreme Court made the point that campaign contributions made into political campaigns by corporations did indeed constitute free speech, did constitute speech under the First Amendment. But the Citizens United justification for unlimited corporate contributions to political campaigns in America was not based so much on the First Amendment free speech as it was on the idea of the marketplace of ideas. And the idea that, the theory, the assumption that the best ideas are only going to surface when they enter into fair and equal competition with competing ideas. And the result is that through the competition of ideas, the weakest ones will fall by the wayside and the strongest ones will prevail. And what that means is that if corporate America has something important to contribute to a particular issue in the marketplace of ideas, then it would totally flaw the process if we eliminated corporate free speech from the mix. So in a sense, what the court was arguing, what Justice Kennedy was arguing, was that the decision was not so much an individual rights decision for corporations as persons under the First Amendment, as it was a process decision, a decision based on the idea that the only way for the marketplace of ideas to truly work is if we did not censor or exclude certain ideas from the conversation. We're going to talk about that today, in a moment. But that's really the issue. The point I wanted to make then is if you subscribe to that, and I kind of do, to be very honest with you. I really believe in the ideal of the free exchange of ideas. I am an ardent supporter of Oliver Wendell Holmes, and many other folks who believed in the concept of the marketplace of ideas. And I want to believe that that is true. I like to believe that the best ideas will prevail and the weakest ones won't. The only problem with it is, of course, it's based on a marketplace that is allowed to work unimpeded by others, and that means that all ideas must be permitted, must be admitted. That was Justice Roberts' justification, and it's very obvious then that under the freedom of press idea in the First Amendment, the emphasis always in decisions in the freedom of press aspect of the First Amendment has been aimed at censorship. I want to deal with that as well, because basically what Justice Kennedy was suggesting is that if we excluded a major contribution to the conversation, which would be corporate opinion on a particular issue, and its right to be heard in the marketplace of ideas, if we exclude that because it's being made by corporations, then effectively we are censoring the speech rights of corporations. And the whole idea of the freedom of press is the idea that censorship is not to be tolerated in our society. We'll be talking about that as well. Again, our phone number, area code 304-658-3333. And if you'd like to email me independently, by all means, I invite you to do so. My email address is waobrien906@gmail.com. That's waobrien906, all one word, @gmail.com. And if you take the time to put down your ideas on a particular issue and send them to me, I promise you that I will take the time not only to read them, but to do my best to respond to you in kind. And I mean that. I think that's the least that you deserve. If you are willing to commit that kind of time, then I feel that I have an obligation to respond appropriately, and I commit to do that. Obviously, if we ever get to the point where I'm getting 50 and 60 and 100 emails a day, that's not going to be possible. But that's a problem I dream about having. So at this point, I am able to do that.
Unlike fish oil, there's no fishy smell or aftertaste. Get all the powerful health benefits of Mega Red and Mega Red Extra Strength.
We had a commercial on our line, and I think I X'd it out. I hope I did. We are dealing with the internet, and obviously it is open. It is open to advertisers. And at this point, I haven't quite figured out the strategy for eliminating these. I'm sure that if you come up with enough money, you could find a way to shield whatever you're doing on the internet from this kind of interference. But as for the 50 to 100 emails a day that we don't quite have yet, we don't have that kind of money either. So I guess we might as well launch into our program. And I wanted to continue on the issue of codetermination, primarily the issue of labor management relations in America. I wanted to do a little bit of historical background on it, and I hope that we will get to some of that today. But before I do, there was an article that appeared in this morning in the Chronicle of Higher Education, in today's Chronicle of Higher Education, which I think is worthy of attention. It touches on many of the issues we've been talking about. It obviously touches on the Constitution, which is the driving theme of our program, because it deals with the whole idea of censorship and the whole idea of the marketplace of ideas. It deals also with the education of our citizens. I think all of these things, in one sense or another, are issues that we have addressed more than one time here at the Virtual Center, and I venture to say that we will address many of them again, because I believe this is one of the most important issues that the nation faces today, not only in terms of its constitution, but in terms of its future. I believe that very, very firmly. I also believe that this issue raises some questions which in part explain why I believe it's very, very important that programs like this and networks like the Head On Radio Network remain on the air. This voice has to be out there because there is a conscious effort among very, very well-placed and well-heeled institutions and forces that will do everything possible to silence voices and opinions on issues that they do not want to hear, or more important, issues that they don't believe that the citizens of the United States should hear. If this is not censorship, if this is not an issue that belongs on the front burner at the Virtual Center for the Study of the United States Constitution, I don't know what is. This is a program this is an article that appeared, the author of this article is Tom Lobianco. It is an article that appeared in the Chronicle of Higher Education as well. The date line is Indianapolis, Indiana. The date is today, July 17th, 2013. The subject is former Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels. If you remember, during the lead up to the 2012 political campaign for President of the United States, Mitch Daniels was considered one of the more sane, moderate voices in the Republican Party that might actually be presidential timber down the road for the Republican Party. For reasons which we won't bother to go into here, that political side of Mitch Daniels' career never came to fruition, at least not in the campaign of 2012. And after you hear about this program, I'm hoping that it won't happen in a future political campaign as well. Mitch Daniels is no longer governor of Indiana. As of January of this year, he is now president of Purdue University, which is one of the major research universities in the world, which makes this story even more incredible and more important. Former Governor Mitch Daniels pledged to promote. One moment.
Try Resolve Stain Remover. The formula penetrates deep into your carpet and removes stains so they don't come back.
Yet another commercial. Mitch Daniels pledged when he became president of Purdue University in January 2013 that he would help promote and support academic freedom. But a series of released emails that came to light today and are reported in the Chronicle of Higher Education suggest that Mitch Daniels attempted to eliminate what he considered to be liberal propaganda from Indiana's institutions of public education while he was governor. Through the Freedom of Information Act, the Associated Press has gotten its hands on some emails written by Governor Daniels in which he requested, this happened in 2010, he requested that former American historian and anti-war activist Howard Zinn, who was a professor of history at Boston University and passed away a couple of years ago, that his writings be banned from classrooms throughout Indiana. And in the process, he asked for what he called a cleanup of college courses in Indiana. In another exchange of emails, Mitch Daniels talked about cutting funding for any program run by a local about cutting funding for a university program run by a university professor who, as it turns out, was one of his sharpest critics. But let's look at the Howard Zinn issue first. It is unclear, according to this piece, how successful these efforts were. Howard Zinn's book, for example, Howard Zinn's book is still used in some courses. But the fact remains that Governor Daniels did launch an expansive push while governor to change what courses hopeful teachers would take credit for at Indiana colleges. The emails are currently raising eyebrows about how Daniels ended up being president of a major research university, not only within the United States, but one of the world's major research universities, just months after critics questioned his lack of academic credentials and his hiring by the Board of Trustees, which he appointed as governor. When he was governor, he appointed the Board of Trustees to Purdue University. Then when he left the governor's office, that same board appointed him president of Purdue University, even though he lacks the kind of academic credentials, which is a doctorate and research credentials. He has a law degree. He has an undergraduate, a bachelor's degree as well. Ken Paulson, president of the First Amendment Center, claimed that it is not unusual for governors or mayors to denounce art, music, or popular culture, that this is fairly common. But he said he couldn't find other examples at hand of governors trying to censor political opponents. Paulson, who is dean of the College of Mass Communication at Middle Tennessee State University, says that, quote, what sets this apart is what appears to be a back-channel effort by the governor to limit access to ideas, unquote. If that is indeed true, this is a violation of the First Amendment. Free speech. It's censorship. Under the First Amendment, the governor is prohibited from trying to suppress expression with which he disagrees, unquote. Here is Daniels seeking assurance from Tony Bennett, who was then superintendent of public instruction in Indiana. It happened on February 9th, 2010, and what he asked Tony Bennett for was assurance that Howard Zinn's book, Exploring Historical Events, was removed from Indiana classrooms. Quote, this is a quote from Governor Daniels. This terrible anti-American academic has finally passed away, Daniels wrote. This email was a matter of days after Howard Zinn passed away. The obits and commentaries mentioned in his book, which is entitled A People's History of the United States, is the textbook of choice in high schools and colleges around the country. It said, it is, that was a reflection moment, it is truly execrable, anti-factual piece of disinformation that misstates American history on every page, he said. Quote, can someone assure me that it is not in use anywhere in Indiana? If it is, how do we get rid of it before more young people are force-fed a totally false version of our history? Unquote. First of all, I've got to basically speak out of the article for a moment about Howard Zinn. When I came to Concord University in 1991 and began to teach American history here, the history department had adopted Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States as required reading for every sophomore who took the American History Survey course at Concord University. What that meant was that there was a regular, standard, one of the best, most reputable textbooks in American history assigned to every student enrolled in History 101, 203 and 204, which was the first semester and second semester of United States history. But as supplemental reading, each course was also required to read Howard Zinn's history, People's History of the United States. It has appeared in a number of editions. It is an approach to American history that students do not get from traditional textbooks. However, I would point out to you that over the years, Howard Zinn's interpretation in a number of his chapters have made their way into creditable textbooks in American history throughout the United States, in colleges and universities, and I am assuming in K through 12 high school American history textbooks as well. Howard Zinn has, over the years, been accepted by the profession as one of the profession's best research historians. Scott Jenkins, who served as Mitch Daniels' education advisor when he was governor, quickly responded to the flap over the emails by noting it was used at Indiana University in a course for teachers on civil rights, feminists, and labor movements. And this quote is from the governor. This crap should not be accepted for any credit by the state. No student will be better taught because someone sat through this session. Which board has jurisdiction over what counts and what doesn't? Daniel responded 3 minutes after Jenkins made his response about the course at Indiana University. David Shane, a top fundraiser and school board member in Indiana, top fundraiser for Governor Daniels, quickly replied with a strategy directing Bennett and Indiana's Commissioner for Higher Education to review university courses across the state. David Shane later added that a statewide review would force to daylight a lot of excrement, unquote. Excrement, crap, un-American, anti-factual, execrable, unbelievable comments by political leaders. Go for it, Daniel replied. Disqualify propaganda and highlight, if there is any, the more useful offerings. Don't the ed schools, schools of education, have at least some substantive professional development courseware to upgrade knowledge of math, science, etc., Governor Daniels wrote. So here is the governor, after he made these comments and put out the word that he wanted his underlings to censor the teaching of American history throughout the university system in the state of Indiana, as well as the K through 12 public school system. Here's that same governor calling for more emphasis on math and science. Given what's happening in our K through 12 schools, given what's happening with our test scores, given what's happening with education throughout the nation, do you begin to see, as I do, what some of the problems are here? In a separate round of emails in April 2009, I'm reading, this is reading directly from the copy. In a separate round of emails in April 2009, Daniels called for an audit and possible funding cut for a program run by Charles Little, executive director of the Indiana Urban Schools Association, a professor at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. Little had been highly critical of Daniels' education overhaul in internal emails, and he often criticized the governor's performance at public meetings. Now, basically, the governor is asking for retaliation against his critics. On Tuesday, this would have been yesterday, July 16th, 2013, Daniels stood by his demand that Howard Zinn be excluded from Indiana classrooms, but said his request was limited principally to K through 12 classrooms where the state has control of curriculum. So what he's arguing, that control of curriculum as governor trumps censorship. Quote, "We must not falsely teach American history in our schools," he said in a Tuesday email to the Associated Press. "We have a law requiring state textbook oversight to guard against frauds like Howard Zinn, and it was encouraging to find that no Hoosier school district had inflicted this book on its students," unquote. On Tuesday, Daniels made no mention of Little, who he had who he had threatened to audit, but he did repeat his contention from the Zinn email that there's need for a cleanup of what is creditworthy in the teaching of our professions. Particularly, he said, I think we need to look at an upgrade of offerings to increase knowledge in the areas of math and science. Once again, here's a man who has a governor who has called for the censorship because the political interpretation of American history by a competent, noted academic historian, a prominent historian, does not meet with his particular political persuasion. At the same time, as governor, he's talking about greater emphasis on math and science. By omission, by inference, what he's suggesting is we don't need to be teaching history anyway. So the combination of censoring politically unpopular decisions from our classrooms, plus reducing the teaching of history and replacing it with math and science, I would suggest to you, promises to infantilize the American public education system in this country. This political point of view cannot stand unchallenged. It should not stand unchallenged. I don't care whether Mitch Daniels is president of Purdue University or governor of Indiana or who he is. This is exactly what's wrong with our education system. I took the liberty, before we went on the air today, of going to the syllabus for the class on the founding that we just offered 2 years ago in our pillars, in our PRISM West Virginia History Grant Program for our American history teachers. I assure you our American history teachers were made aware of Howard Zinn as a historian. In the final exam for that class, I asked our teachers the following. I think I may have mentioned this on air before, but if I have, please excuse me. But I think it's very appropriate here. We had just finished a class on America's founders. And what I asked our teachers to do is to speculate based on their understanding of the ideals, values, principles, and ideas of the founders. I asked them to respond to a particular point of view about teaching history, because all of them were history teachers themselves. And here was the question that I asked our teachers to wrestle with. In 1816, now 1816, obviously 4 years after the War of 1812, the last year of James Madison's administration before the election of James Monroe as President of the United States. In 1816, Congress enacted a tax on imported foreign books. Jefferson, who had been president up until 1812, protested, as did Harvard, Yale, and other institutions around the country, the American Philosophical Society, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. All of these organizations and institutions of higher education, along with former President Jefferson, protested Congress's enactment in 1816 of a tax on imported foreign books. The chairman of the Senate Finance Committee defended the tax as follows, and this is a quote from a speech delivered by the chairman of the Senate's Finance Committee that approved this particular tax on imported foreign books. Quote, "Our government is peculiar to ourselves, and our books of instruction should be adapted to the nature of the government and the genius of the people. In the best of foreign books, we are liable to meet with criticism and comparisons not very flattering to the American people. In American editions of these offensive and illiberal parts, let me repeat that. In American editions of these, the offensive and illiberal parts are expunged or explained, and the work is adapted to the exigencies and tastes of the American reader. But withdraw the protection. Our channels of instruction will be foreign. Our youth will imbibe sentiment, form attachments, and acquire habits adverse to our prosperity, unfriendly to our government, and dangerous to our liberties." This particular speech is quoted by Gordon Wood in his recent book, 2011, Empire of Liberty. which is principally on the administration of Thomas Jefferson, the administrations of Thomas Jefferson. I feel the need to repeat this quote because it is so important. Our government is peculiar to ourselves, and our books of instruction should be adapted to the nature of the government and the genius of the people. Translation: our people can't handle anything but positions and interpretations with which they are comfortable. Positions and interpretations which agree with their beliefs rather than which challenge their beliefs. The speech goes on. In the best of foreign books, we are liable to meet with criticism and comparisons not very flattering to the American people. Obviously, the one point not considered here is that if we educated our youngsters properly, they could handle criticism and comparisons not very flattering to the American people. But if their education is primarily focused on what to believe rather than the ability to think for themselves, then they would be vulnerable to these criticisms and comparisons which are not very flattering to the American people, hence the need to protect them from it. In American editions of these offensive and illiberal parts, the offensive and illiberal parts are expunged or explained, and the work is adapted to the exigencies and tastes of the American reader. Translation: we are rewriting these textbooks, these books from foreign countries, so they will conform to the values and sensitivities of our young people. But withdraw the protection, our channels of instruction will be foreign, our youth will imbibe sentiment, form attachments, and acquire habits adverse to our prosperity, unfriendly to our government, and dangerous to our liberties. Translation: our students who have been taught what to believe, not how to think, cannot handle anything but points of view and interpretations which reinforce what they already believe. That is a speech delivered in the United States Senate in 1816. It is a violation of what the founders stood for. It is a violation of what Thomas Jefferson stood for. It's a violation of what Harvard stands for, Yale stands for, other institutions stand for, the American Philosophical Society, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. I give you, again, Mitch Daniels' effort to ban Howard Zinn's textbook, People's History of the United States, from the classrooms of Indiana. And I suggest to you that we have come not very far from 1816 to yesterday, July 16th, 2013, when Mitch Daniel, president of Purdue University, defended the emails which became public only in recent days about his effort to censor the textbooks and censor the classrooms of the state of Indiana. In response to that speech, I'm back to my own assignment here. In response to that speech, this is what I asked our teachers to do. In response to this issue, Jefferson's position likely would have been the same in 1776 had there been an American government with the power to enact such a tax as it was in 1816. In other words, we assume that Jefferson's position on these kinds of things did not change all that much. But what clearly had changed by 1816 was the nation's stance on the very same issue. The optimism that had colored the ability of Americans of all stripes to handle information like this was gone. The optimism of 1776, which basically led founders to believe that American virtues, the virtues of the American citizenry were such, the nature of our government was such, that we were going to be able to handle this kind of stuff. Our youngsters were going to be able to handle this kind of stuff. By 1816, that optimism was gone. What replaced it was the idea that we had to shield students from alien ideas. In its place was a tendency to shield our students from points of view different from their own, justified by the need to protect American liberties, which is exactly what the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee said in defense of this tax in 1816. What I asked our teachers to do was to address from the list of options below each of these options as if it were the same Senate table, on the same table in 1816 as the proposed tax on foreign books. Question 1. How would the founders have handled this matter in 1776, given their attitudes toward America's future, toward people's ability to handle difficult or unfamiliar issues, and toward the plans that they had for the nation at that time? What I asked our teachers to do is go back to what they knew about the founders and the values and the ideals of the founders in 1776, and from that perspective respond to the speech in 1816. Second option. What changes had occurred in the nation or in the world since 1776 that would clearly have altered the founders' response to the issues at hand, and perhaps even changed their approach and handling of the issue? What had happened after 1776 that caused America's willingness to allow foreign ideas and foreign points of view to come before our youngsters within the United States and within our school system? And of course, what had happened was that the optimism of 1776 had depleted to the point that by the late 1780s, we were ready to scrap the Articles of Confederation and replace it with a new form of government that would essentially handle things that some of the founders had come to realize the American people were incapable of handling themselves. So the political climate, the political environment had changed to the point that government's role was protect the minds of young people from ideas which were alien to their belief system. Oh my God, what does that tell us about American education? The third option, examine each issue you select as it emerged as a key element in America's development during the period from 1789 to 1815. What were the key ingredients raised by this controversy? How did it affect America's future as that future was being defined? In other words, what I'm asking them to do is look at the administrations of Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison between 1789 and 1815, and look for examples which reinforce the mentality that produced this particular speech defending the tax on foreign books. I can't tell you. I thought we would be going to be dealing most of today. It's now 40 minutes after the hour, first hour of our program. So here's 40 minutes that we've devoted to this today, and I thought we were going to be dealing with management-labor relations in the United States. But clearly, we keep coming back to the well, as it were. It is absolutely vital, it is absolutely critical that these issues be flagged and discussed. We talked yesterday, and of course over the weekend everybody talked about the Zimmerman decision in the Trayvon Martin case. And we talked about the whole issue of justice, and we talked yesterday about the very subtle aspects of racism which would make it very, very difficult in our society to address this. I would suggest to you that part of the reason for that is this. Part of the reason for that is that what Mitch Daniels is mouthing, this is not just exclusive to him. Basically, he is saying what many people of this persuasion believe. He's giving us something to chew on. He's giving us some verification that indeed this particular political point of view is out there and is prevalent and is very dangerous, and we have got to recognize it, we have got to flag it, we have got to draw attention to it, and damn it, we have to challenge it. We have to challenge it. The basic belief that youngsters in the United States are not capable of thinking, and that therefore the only safe avenue for their education is for us to tell them what to think and what to believe and how to act and what to read and what not to read and all the rest of it, is absolutely condemning America. It is condemning the skills of America's young people. No wonder we can't compete with the world. We're afraid of the world. We're afraid of their ideas. We're afraid because we don't believe that our young people are educated well enough to handle them and recognize the spin and the interpretation and the nature of these ideas. In other words, we are acknowledging up front. Governor Daniels is acknowledging up front that as governor of the state of Indiana, he did not see his job as overseeing the education of the young people of Indiana. Rather, he saw his job as the brainwashing of the young people in the state of Indiana and shielding them from the kinds of ideas and the kinds of interpretations that would be uncomfortable to them. I'm going to continue this email about the Mitch Daniels situation to its conclusion, principally because toward the end of this email, the faculty of Purdue University makes itself heard in this controversy. And I think it's very, very important. The last thing that we looked at was Mitch Daniels' call just yesterday, his reiteration of the upgrading of our offerings to increase knowledge in the areas of math and science. As long as people believe, I'm putting words in Mitch Daniels' mouth here, and perhaps I shouldn't, but I'm speculating what's in his mind. And I would suggest to you what's in his mind is, if these people believe the right thing, then they can do all the math and science research and experimentation they want. It doesn't matter. We're covered. Carrie Nelson, which was a name that I've heard of, is an English professor at the University of Illinois. For a number of years, 6 of them actually, Carrie Nelson was president of the American Association of University Professors. When in my early years at Concord, was an officer in what is called the AAUP, the American Association of University Professors. And this is the professional faculty statement of standards and behavior governing the role of faculty in higher education. Carrie Nelson was taken aback by these emails, thankfully, as was I. Carrie Nelson said the following: "It is astonishing and shocking that such a person is now the head of a major research university, making decisions about curriculum that one painfully suspect embodies the same ignorance and racism that these comments embody." That's a pretty powerful attack by an English professor at the University of Illinois about the president of Purdue University. And then the article goes on to point out that the AAUP, the American Association of University Professors, often investigates cases of censorship from university officials. Nelson said, but it's unlikely the group would open an investigation of Daniels unless his tactics had continued through his time as Purdue's president. In other words, if, as president of Purdue University, Daniels continues to put forth the same ideas, the same narrow ideas that he put forth as governor, then that would be justification for the AAUP to step in and do some sort of investigation about what's happening at Purdue University. The academies that, through the unique system of tenure, let me go back. I skipped the paragraph, and I want to make sure I cover it all. Daniels has adopted, the article says, a different public approach since taking over as president of Purdue University. He hosted a lecture that included AAUP members on speech suppression at universities nationwide. And he sent an open letter to the Purdue community in January, right after he became president, saying that universities have squashed free speech rather than encouraging it. So here he is putting out to the community at Purdue University his support for free speech. This is after these emails which he wrote as governor, which, of course, hadn't surfaced at that time. This is what Daniels wrote. The academies, through the unique system of tenure, once enshrined freedom of opinion and inquiry, now frequently are home to the narrowest sort of closed-mindedness and the worst repression of dissonant ideas, he wrote. I want to repeat that, not only because I didn't read it very well, but also because I feel that it's worth a comment. The academy, higher education, through the unique system of tenure, now this is the president of Purdue University speaking, through the unique system of tenure, once enshrined freedom of opinion and inquiry, now frequently is home to the narrowest sort of closed-mindedness and the worst repression of dissonant ideas. What Daniels is taking on now is tenure. The reason for tenure, the reason that professional faculty members during the turn of the century lobbied for and were able to secure tenure rights for faculty was because there was a conscious effort by government to control what faculty members could say and could assign as reading in their classrooms. In other words, it was to protect academic freedom from political interference by governors like Mitch Daniels that led to the establishment of tenure as part of the whole basis for academic freedom in higher education. Now Mitch Daniels, as governor of Purdue University, is taking on tenure by suggesting that faculty members are oftentimes abusing tenure in universities which once enshrined freedom of opinion and inquiry, in other words, academic freedom, but now they are the home to the narrowest sort of closed-mindedness and the worst repression of dissonant ideas. I ask you to think back to the emails he wrote in 2009 and 2010 as governor of the state of Indiana. When you think about closed-mindedness and the worst repression of dissident ideas. Mitch Daniels is mouthing the rhetoric of what a president at a major research university is supposed to say to the academic community. It is totally inconsistent with what he wrote in these emails as governor of the state. J. Paul Robinson, former chairman of the Purdue University Faculty Senate, which represents faculty, reviewed Daniels' emails yesterday, Tuesday, and said that he wasn't concerned that they would transfer to Purdue University. The faculty, this is a quote from J. Paul Robinson, who's former chairman of the Faculty Senate at Purdue University. The faculty still are the ones that establish the academic standards and the curricula. And we are not easily moved, Robinson said. Mitch knows this, and I'm pretty sure he respects it, and even more now that he is here than when he was outside. What a statement from the former president of the faculty at Purdue University. Now that Mitch Daniels is no longer an elected politico and is now in the academy, he's one of us. He knows what we stand for. He knows what we believe and why we believe it. I don't worry for a minute about good old Mitch. Purdue University Board of Trustees Chairman Keith Krach, K-R-A-C-H, who hired Daniels last year as president of the university, did not return an email asking for comment on this issue. Trustees are scheduled to receive a 6-month assessment from Daniels this week. Daniels is expected this week to submit his 6-month review of the first 6 months of his presidency at Purdue University. It is now 48 minutes after the hour. We have exceeded 3/4 of our first hour today on this issue. I think it is so important. It is so critical. First of all, it is censorship. Secondly, it violates the basic tenets of what the academy is all about. Thirdly, it is a blatant example of contradiction by a man who said one thing as elected governor and is saying something else as the president of the university. Yet at the same time, it's important to recognize that while he's saying all the right things about academic freedom within the university, he is also attacking the tenure system, which came into being because politicos like him in the late 19th and early 20th century set out to control what faculty members were able to say or not say in their own classrooms and what books they were allowed to assign or not assign in classes they taught. If there's a problem with academic tenure, it's a problem which, it seems to me, the faculty itself needs to take on and improve. I personally, this gets into the issue that we addressed yesterday, and I hope we'll address in our second hour today, is the issue of employer-employee relations. What we're talking about here is that same employer-employee scenario in higher education, the president versus the faculty at Purdue University, or the governor of the state and the kind of education that happens within the state. We are talking about the same kinds of things here. The whole idea, in fact, this was the point, one of the points that I was going to make today, in the whole idea about employer-employee relations and ways to change them. I was about to use higher education as an example of the kinds of things that working people needed to think about in their approach to working more positively and more cooperatively and more successfully with employers and with corporate America. Basically, the model from education is based on the idea of professionalism. It is based on the idea that education came to recognize in the development of governance in higher education. The governing structure in higher education is based on the principle, the same kind of assumptions, the same kinds of principles that drive the ideas behind the marketplace of ideas. It is based on the idea that the best ideas are those ideas which can weather and withstand criticism and competition from competing ideas and points of view. That's what the marketplace of ideas is all about. That's what free competition is all about. That's the basis on which Charles Darwin's scientific research was based, which supports, which underwrites the whole idea of evolution in the world of nature. The idea that progress in nature happens as a result of the struggle for existence, as a result of the competition. And taking those ideas and translating them into the marketplace of ideas, the assumption is that the best ideas will prevail in the same way, provided they are allowed to compete with the best from the alternatives. If you eliminate the alternatives from the conversation, if you censor the alternatives, then a particular idea has a much better chance of prevailing. But it is an idea or a program or a plan that has never been tested. Higher education buys into this. Higher education is based on the assumption that the best decisions are decisions that involve all of the people who have something positive to contribute to the decision-making process itself. When it comes to academic matters, when it comes to scholarship, when it comes to research, when it comes to academic quality, when it comes to intelligent quality decision-making in higher education, it is absolutely vital that the professionals in that field, the faculty, are involved in the decision-making process. It is absolutely inane. It doesn't make any sense to assume that people who don't know anything about research, who don't know anything about academics or very little, would make decisions that directly affect the academy, which directly affect student learning, research, skills, writing, reading competency, all the rest of it. In other words, in areas of academic decision-making, where the priorities of scholarship and education itself are involved, those engaged in that process must be involved as well, the faculty. That's what academic governance is about. That's why the faculty senate, the faculty at Purdue University has a senate and has a voice and has somebody at the table when the president of the university is appointed. One has to believe that if the search committee screening applicants for the president of Purdue University had done its work and done it well, the emails that just surfaced yesterday would have surfaced during the search process. And Mitch Daniels would have been asked to account for some of the things he said in these emails as governor as part of his interview for the presidency of Purdue University. But now that is water under the bridge. And I don't know about you, but I don't get the sense of this feel-good, this sense of feel-goodness about the president, the ex-president of the faculty senate, who says, now Mitch is one of us. He's not a politician anymore. He's now back into the academy. He's one of us. He knows what we're about. He knows where we stand. Everything will be fine. We're not worried about Mitch at all. This from a president who has already attacked tenure, who's gone on record as being opposed to tenure because it violates academic freedom. When in fact, the very existence of tenure came into being in order to defend and protect academic freedom from people like Mitch Daniel as governor of Indiana. If you aren't worried, those of you who are out there listening to and participating in today's version of the Virtual Center for the Study of the U.S. Constitution, if you aren't concerned, you should be. This is censorship. This speaks to an approach to education which is deadly. This helps explain why our education system is in trouble. This helps explain why so many of our youngsters don't finish high school, don't finish college, leave college with huge debt but no degree, graduate from college as well as high school without the kinds of skills that employers are looking for. Youngsters who can't do independent research, who can't do independent thinking, who don't know a good source from a bad source because they don't know the kinds of questions to ask. They don't know how to think because they've never been asked to think. They've never been encouraged to think. They've never been confronted with points of view that are contrary to their own. For them, education is year after year, semester after semester after semester, of being exposed to ideas and points of view which conform perfectly to what they already believe. The idea being that when they graduate, they will believe what they believed when they started school. They'll believe more firmly. They'll be more difficult to believe. Why do we have a record in wartime of American prisoners of war and torture? Why is it that American prisoners have traditionally been more likely to break under torture? Because there's all sorts of records to demonstrate that our young people come out with a whole set of beliefs, but they really don't have a whole lot of reasons why for anything they believe, except using the old grade school story, Why is that true? Because my teacher said it was. Because I believe it. Because that's the way it is. Because I said so and I'm the teacher. Because I have the power to decide what is and what isn't, and therefore I will tell you what is, and on and on and on. I would suggest to you that what we see in the Mitch Daniels emails are examples of the very same behavior that caused the city of Athens to condemn Socrates to death, because he was poisoning the minds of youth. He was raising questions about things that those in power did not want questioned. And that was in ancient Athens. How many years ago was that? It is 2013 in the United States of America. We are on the internet. We are potentially reaching the far reaches of the world. And so much has changed in the world, and so much has not. It is the top of the hour. We will pause for a 4 or 5 minute break, and then we'll be back with our second hour on today's Virtual Center for the Study of the U.S. Constitution. I'm Bill O'Brien. Thank you for being with us. Please stay with us. We'll be back for another hour. Welcome to our second hour in today's Virtual Center for the Study of the United States Constitution. I am Bill O'Brien. It is July 13th, and we have completed our first hour. If you were here for it and are still with us, I appreciate your willingness to stay with us. I have to believe, I presume, I hope, that what you heard in the first hour was, in part at least, the reason that you are still with us. If you have a comment, if you have something you would like to air on our first hour on the Mitch Daniels and the censorship issues related to the Howard Zinn book on the People's History of the United States, by all means feel free to do it. Our phone line is open. The number is area code 304-658-3333. That's 304-658-3333. If you'd like to communicate with me directly via email, then by all means, I appreciate that. My email address, waobrien906@gmail.com. waobrien906@gmail.com. I had planned, and obviously we probably will not finish today, the issue of co-determination. To be very, very honest with you, co-determination is something that I feel very, very comfortable about, and I feel that it is something that all of us need to really think about. Before we get into that, however, let's go to a caller. We do have a caller on the line, and if my eyes don't deceive me, it is Jeff. Hi, Jeff.
How are you? I just love to listen to you talk. You do a great job.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Jeff.
And what between when I listen to Kincaid talk, you and he both are very sincere on what you're talking about, and I it doesn't sound like a lot of nonsense. It sounds like you're a scholar of what you do. You do great stuff. When I hear you speak about, like you said, the teacher said that, so therefore you will believe that, and you were talking about that.
Yes.
When you talk about the Constitution, that is your thing, and I've actually learned so much about listening to your podcast, and I'm so glad they're up there because I could hear them, and they were very educational. I mean, absolutely. But here's my problem. You believe in the Constitution, and you believe in this country, and so do I. But
yes.
I have a problem. And my problem with this is we are trying to fix this political system to work for us, even though, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is where you come in. The was set up so that the elites can actually run the country. There were two schools like Brown and so on and so forth, and before the Constitution was written, and then the elites ran, and then we have the electoral college, and we have, so it's never really set up for the little guy to run, to actually have a voice. And you mentioned earlier that we're on internet radio. You could not get real programming that means humanitarian, real humanitarian stuff for, on for-profit media. So,
I understand what you're saying. I really do. I have an issue with. I have a little bit of an issue with what you're saying, but it's not that much of an issue.
Go ahead. I want to hear that.
Okay. I think that, Jeff. I think the difference. I think and again, it's not a major difference. But when you say that the system was set up to be run by elites, it's important to appreciate and understand why that's true. And it's true because the people who set it up believed that only the elites were qualified to run it. Okay, now, all right.
Okay, okay, I'm buying that.
Okay, that did not mean that the whole thing was set up as a sham so that the elites could rip off the general population because they had the power to do that. These people really believed, I guess this has to be an element of faith. But I believe that they genuinely believed that the system would prevail as long as the people who had their priorities in order, which was the public interest ahead of the private interest, were in control. Their concern was that they would lose control to people who only were driven by self-interest. They did not accept the reality that you accept and that I accept as well, which is that, in effect, the self-interest of the elite, they are assuming, is the public interest, is the best interest for everybody else. They are assuming that. I agree with you.
Okay,
but
now,
when you said,
go ahead.
Okay, when you first called, you made a comment and said, we're trying to fix a system that was set up so that the elites could control it. But there's a step missing. And the missing is that not that many people understand the nature of the way that the system was set up. They really don't understand what the system is about. This Mitch Daniels stuff that we talked about in the first hour is a classic example. These people don't want the people to know. Now, I believe, again, and this is just me, but I believe that there is intelligence out there in the general population. I believe that a lot of the best ideas go by the wayside because so many people are able to see the hypocrisy that they are being asked to believe. And a lot of them just reject it. They go through school, they go through the motions, they intentionally multiple guess on tests that they know the answer to. They put absolutely absurd answers. What they're doing is basically rebelling against the system itself. And they are basically claiming or trying to be heard and saying, this system is a joke. You know it. I know it. Why won't you say it? And the point I'm trying to make is once we begin to understand what the basic premises of this system are, it is potentially, and I mean this potentially, it is potentially the most wonderful, greatest system in the history of man because it is based on the idea that every individual ought to have the opportunity to go as far as he or she can go. And we have an obligation and we have a duty to recognize that the strength of our system is measured by the extent to which we fulfill that mission. And we got a lot of fixing to do.
Okay, but here's the problem. This is where the rub lies.
Yeah, but the rub is not to come up with an alternative. The rub is not to come up with an alternative until people are able to understand the system that we are in. There's a missing element here. What we end up with in traditional talk media, and I'm thinking of the MSNBC, Fox News, that whole scenario. What we end up with is 2 points of view, and the basic assumption is both of them are based on the idea that the American people are not educated enough and qualified enough and capable enough to spot the spin in either side and to recognize or to cull out the substance from both sides. And my point of view is the answer to this is we have got to turn the process of education around in order that we are turning out a citizenry that is capable of fulfilling the dreams of the founders. The founders basically committed this nation to something that I don't even believe they themselves understood the full implications of what they were talking about. That everybody potentially has something to contribute to the common good. Everybody. And what we have is a system where in order to leave the decision-making to the elites, we have come up with this intricately, this very, I think, absolutely negative, hostile, dangerous system of striking down people on the basis of a set of criteria that aren't even real. Our children are being evaluated and being measured on the basis of criteria and performance, and they don't even know it. They don't even know what the stakes are. They don't know what the options are. They are not able to recognize the game, the rules of the game that they are participating in. The rules are being made up as they go along, because there are all sorts of stereotypes and things that go into the equation from the very beginning. Our whole history as a people is replete with examples of exclusion. We didn't believe that the poor were capable. We only believed that the wealthy were capable. Then we only believed that Christians were capable. Then we only believed that people with higher education were capable. Then we only believed that people with money were capable. Then we only believed that people who could buy political influence were capable. Then we only believed that people who could organize people to follow them and emerged as leaders and demagogues, only they were capable. Then we believed that women weren't capable. Then we believed that blacks weren't capable. Then we believed that Hispanics weren't capable and gays weren't capable, and on and on and on. We have come up with one excuse after the other as to why we are demeaning groups of people to second-class citizenship in this society, and it has to stop. And I think it's going to stop programs like this.
I'm concurring with you on my problem with what you're saying is how does one get this to change? And I think very specifically, we are trying to change a system that is almost you and I and most of the people who are, and I consider myself a humanitarian, wants to make sure that the system that the founders actually thought of works. But the reason we have to ask, why is it that we spend half of our, well, in some cases, our entire life studying and lobbying our congressmen and our senators? We spend maybe a month getting an audience with one of them. You get to the Congress or the senator's office, and you see their aide. The aide very nicely smiles at you, asks you how much you're going to donate. Bottom line, and that's the game. And
That's right.
And it goes no further. We are trying to change this game, and I have to go. You must go back before the United States was around. You need to go several thousand years back. The whole problem is within the economic. The political system works absolutely perfectly fine. It's just that the economic system doesn't work fine. And that's the basic all over the world, not just
But
here.
Jeff, the key is that we may agree on that. You and I may agree on that. But the fact of the matter is we don't have the right to ask other people to agree as well. What we're basically doing is saying the system needs to be changed. The system that you're in right now isn't working for this reason and that working. Here's example after example after example after example. Therefore, bear with me. Here's a system that can work. And basically, we're asking people to jump into and believe something else. And what I'm suggesting is that's been the history of the world.
That's right.
And a lot of times throughout history, most people have come and say, believe me, I've got the answer. And the reason I know is because I went out into the wilderness and God told me. God gave me a set of tablets, or God told me this, or I had an audience with God, or, Muhammad did it.
Let me jump in there a minute. Let me just get 1 minute. The economic system, in fact, is a worldwide belief system. And I'm saying to you that any other religion, that a belief system, a religion, this is prayer Wednesday night, I guess, I can opt out of any religion I choose to opt out of, but I cannot opt out of the belief in the economic system.
Which is based upon it. You're exactly right.
Okay, so I'm saying if I have belief, I must be able to judge how that makes it work for everybody.
But the difference is that people need to come to the realization on their own. They can't be asked to transfer their faith from a system that has let them down into another system that they have no reason to believe will not let them down again.
I agree with that. That's why the suggestion is how. And I'm not saying any one person has the measurement or the idea, but we need to look at as you said a few programs back, you need to have the leaders to put the ladders on the right wall. What I'm suggesting is that we don't even know which wall to put it on.
I understand that. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that was an absolutely wonderful quote. I think it was the guy, Stephen Covey, the guy that wrote the seven habits of highly successful people. I think that was his quote, but it's a darn good one.
I can't remember these guys' names.
Yeah, I think it's Stephen Covey, but that's a minor point. But
what I'm saying is it was a very good analogy. What I'm saying is we still have to put the ladders up on the walls if they're crumbling. But I'm suggesting that there's an overlying problem that I fell into the trap, and most people I know, right? Your congressman, try to do something, get your word out. I mean, the reason why you're doing this radio program on internet station is because you're frustrated as all get out to get information out, and you can't get it out. The world doesn't understand it, but you're putting it out there beautifully. Now, you can hear the frustration in my voice, I guess.
Okay, no, that's fine. Hey, listen, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate what you said, and I got to say, very honestly, that I don't know, and I want the folks back in the studio, Agnes, to know this, that's the first conversation that I've had with Jeff where the sound was absolutely I could understand every word he said. And what he says is pretty intelligent stuff, pretty solid stuff, and I appreciate that. Jeff, thank you very, very much. Again, please feel free to share your ideas and your perceptions. Our number is area code 304-658-3333. We'd love to hear from you. And I know I would love to hear your ideas on the conversation I just had with Jeff or the whole situation with Mitch Daniels or whatever. We are at 23 minutes after the hour. And I want to get into something I thought we'd be into it early, and I've been trying to think of a good way after yesterday. We talked a lot yesterday about labor management relations and about the assumptions that drove each side. And the point that I was trying to make yesterday, and again, at this point, I'm just lecturing. I mean, I don't want you to believe me. And this kind of goes to Jeff's point, the point that Jeff just made. I'm not asking you to buy into and become an acolyte or a supporter or, of my point of view. What I'm trying to do is express points of view about your point of view. And what I want you to do is not so much think about my point of view. I want you to reflect on your own point of view. I think the first step in this whole process is to begin some serious cognitive activity, some reflection, some alone moments with nobody in the room but you. And think about some of the things that you believe and why you believe them. Because it's only as a result of that process that anything positive can happen. And what we have got to hope for is that more and more and more people engage in that process. And I would suggest to you that what we've talked about on the program, especially during our first hour today, what we've talked about is a point of view which doesn't want any of that reflection to happen. It doesn't want the alien ideas to even come into your frame of reference. It doesn't want, they want to protect you. When I say they, Mitch Daniels, I'm going to use his name because he's the one. I don't want to, imply more than I have a right to imply. But the fact of the matter is, this point of view, which is very, very prominent out there, does not accept your ability to think for yourself. Rather, it believes, these people believe, that their best chance is convince you to buy into what they believe. That's why we can't take that same avenue. We can't go that same route. I don't have the right, nor do I have the skill to persuade people. I'm not going to lead a worldwide revolution. I'm not capable of doing that, I don't believe. I don't want you to just buy into my opinion and say, oh, he sounds convincing. I'm going to believe him. I'm going to follow him wherever he goes. Please don't do that. I don't want you to do that. All I want you to do is reflect on your own belief system. Because once you begin to understand why you believe what you believe and why you don't, then you're going to begin to look at the reasons why. And once you begin to look for the reasons why, that's what the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution is the expansion of our understanding as citizens of the United States on what this system of government that we live in and are so fortunate to live in is about. This is not radical stuff. This is not to be dangerous stuff. But I swear to you, the Mitch Daniels of the world are going to see this as very dangerous. They see Howard Zinn as dangerous. They don't even want young people to know that Howard Zinn's books exist. And they are good books. And they are ideas and considerations which are worthy of consideration. They are not alien books. And this, I didn't mean to go here, but here I am right back at the beginning. The difference is Mitch Daniels is afraid that you'll be so persuaded by Howard Zinn that you'll become a follower of him. So his only way to protect us from that is to shield us from Howard Zinn. At root, that fear is based on the assumption that I can't think for myself, that I am not capable of seeing through Howard Zinn or Karl Marx or Jeff that just called or Mitch Daniels or James Madison or anybody else. What we're about at the Virtual Center here is looking at the ideas and looking at the words of the founders, looking at the ideas of the people themselves, and doing our best to try to understand what they believed or what they thought they believed. I would suggest to you that these people did not put out end products. More often than not, what they wrote back and forth to each other was speculation. They were bouncing their ideas off each other and waiting for the response. They were doing it the way we want to do it. They were doing it the way the Horn wants to do it. We want to hear from you. We want your ideas. We want your reactions. We want your suggestions. We want your criticisms. I want to grow in what I know because of what you have to contribute to what I already know, just as I want to contribute to what you already know. That's the way all of us grow. That's the founders practiced that process. They bounced ideas off each other. It is not an accident that Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, between Paris and James Madison when he was in Virginia and then when he was in Philadelphia, were writing back and forth, bouncing ideas back and forth off each other on rights, on powers, on where the power is best, on what to be afraid of, on where the greatest dangers come, on why popular governments. One of the most beautiful letters ever written was James Madison's request when Thomas Jefferson was coming back to the United States to pack as many cases as possible as he could with the greatest books in the world and bring them back, because James Madison was in the process of studying the history of governments in the world. He wanted this system, which he basically drafted as the Virginia Plan, to be the product of his best effort to understand the ancients, understand the things they tried, what worked, what didn't work, why they didn't work, why they worked, etc., etc., etc. That's what we want to happen. We're not in a game. We're not in a contest here to win acolytes or to win votes. We're talking about the process of education. And the most dangerous thing of all is to conduct education in a way which we do not allow children to experience it. If you believe for a minute that school, education, thinking is dull, that studying people is dull, my God, think about that. Think about an industry, the movie industry, where more and more of the video, of the films, are animated. We're not even talking about real people anymore. We're talking about principles. We're selling principles. We're not celebrating actors. We're not talking about people who are great actors because they have the ability to bring us, members of the audience, into the script, into the world in which the part that they are playing is unfolding. We've eliminated all of that. We don't have time for kids to read novels. Kids read texts. They tweet. It's limited to the number of characters. They can't read whole paragraphs, whole pages, whole chapters, entire books. Mitch Daniels says not only that, but we're going to screen your books. We want you to read exactly what we want you to read. And then we don't want you to read a lot of that stuff anyway. We want you to perfect your skills in math and science. Because we got an economy to run. We got jobs to create. What you believe as a citizen of this nation is meaning. We'll tell you what to believe. If that doesn't frighten you, it frightens me. And again, the model, and this is one of the reasons I became so very active in the AAUP, the American Association of University Professors, because of the academic principles that educators stood for, the freedom, the academic freedom to do research, honest research, and to base your conclusions on what the research said, not on what the people paying for the research, the grant, right, the grant, those who issued the grant want you to find. Not going out there and doing skewed, dishonest research by going out there to find proof so that the person who's paying you the money to find it will be rewarded with your results, which will reinforce what that person wants you to find. That is totally dishonest. It is far, far too common. What we need are people that are honestly in pursuit of truth, that are going out there trying to find the answers to the tough questions. And we have got to be willing to deal with the results and to deal positively with the results. And we have got to prepare our young people to deal with those results as well, to shield them from the realities of the world. In a world where there's internet, in a world where they have access to all the information that's accessible through the whole world, is naive. It's absurd. It can't work. It's going to kill us. I'm going to read a passage, a couple of passages from a speech that was delivered in 1895 by Booker T. Washington. And I'm going to begin by laying the political context for that speech. It is Atlanta, Georgia. It is 1895. It is the Southern Exposition. It is the opportunity, it's the equivalent of the World's Fair. It's the opportunity for Southern states throughout the South to come together and bring their best in manufacturing and industrial development to the exposition in order to show off their stuff. Booker T. Washington's audience is the white leadership of the post-Civil War South, the post-Reconstruction South. The South is beginning to industrialize. Slavery's gone. The Civil War killed it. The Civil War amendments killed it. Reconstruction has happened. The Union is being recreated, reassembled. Southern states are coming back into the Union. And now the South is beginning to move into the Industrial Revolution. And one of the things we know, because it happened in the North, was that as the nation moves into the Industrial Revolution, it is absolutely, totally dependent on labor. Workers. Jobs. The possibility of jobs. The possibility of opportunity. The possibility in exploding, growing economy that the people who never before had an opportunity at the American dream, an opportunity at success, now had the opportunity to earn an income and begin to experience success, albeit not the same level of success as everybody else. But in the absence of success, success is pretty exciting. There are exciting things happening in the South in 1895. But there are also very dangerous things happening in the South in 1895 if you happen to be a black American. Because state after state has replaced slavery with laws segregating the races, separating the races. 3 years before the Southern Exposition in 1895 in Atlanta, in 1892, the Supreme Court rendered its decision on segregation. And the Supreme Court said that separate but equal was constitutional, as long as the accommodations and the conditions were equal. It was okay for the Southern states to discriminate and separate based on race. And state after state is going in that direction. Booker T. Washington, as a spokesman for the black community in the South, is very aware that if black Americans are not given an opportunity to participate in the South's version of the Industrial Revolution, they will be forever condemned to poverty. The only way that ex-slaves are going to have a chance is if the white South is willing to permit them, is willing to include them in a new, growing, developing South. That's the political context. That's the challenge that Booker T. Washington faces as he speaks to the white industrial leaders of the South. And he speaks as follows. Mr. President and gentlemen of the Board of Directors and citizens, 1/3 of the population of the South is of the Negro race. No enterprise seeking the material, civil, or moral welfare of this section can disregard this element of our population and reach the highest success. 1/3 of the population of the South is black. If you disregard this, you can't be. I but convey to you, Mr. President and directors, the sentiment of the masses of my race when I say that in no way have the value and manhood of the American Negro been more fittingly and generously recognized than by the managers of this magnificent exposition at every stage of its progress. It is a recognition that will do more to cement the friendship of the two races than any occurrence since the dawn of our freedom. Everything you see here at this exposition, Washington is saying, speaks to the potential that we all can realize if we are willing to work together. Not only this, Washington says, but the opportunity here afforded will awaken among us a new era of industrial progress. Ignorant and inexperienced, it's not strange that in the first years of our new life, we began at the top instead of at the bottom, that a seat in Congress or at the state legislature was more sought than real estate or industrial skill, that the political convention or stump speaking that had more attractions than starting a dairy farm or a truck garden. What Washington is doing here is criticizing, he's agreeing with them in the criticisms of Reconstruction, where the radical Republicans tried to push African Americans into positions of political power in the South in order to replace the old white planter slavery aristocracy. In other words, what the Reconstruction liberals in the Republican Party had tried to do was to replace the old South with a new South. And what he's acknowledging is that the members of the white South that resented it, were not ready for it, and looked down upon the blacks, who were merely the victims in this political game. And then he goes into one of the strangest, one of the most famous metaphors that this speech is so known for. A ship lost at sea for many days suddenly sighted a friendly vessel. From the mast of the unfortunate vessel was seen a signal. Water, water, we die of thirst. The answer from the friendly vessel at once came back. Cast down your buckets where you are. A second time the signal. Water, water, send us water. Ran up from the distressed vessel, and was answered again. Cast down your bucket. The captain of the distressed vessel, at last heeding the injunction, cast down his bucket, and it came back full of fresh, sparkling water from the mouth of the Amazon. To those of my race who depend on bettering their condition in a foreign land, or who underestimate the importance of cultivating friendly relations with the southern white man, who is their next-door neighbor, I would say, cast down your bucket where you are. Cast it down in making friends in every manly way of the people of all races by whom we are surrounded. So in talking to his own race, Booker T. Washington is telling them, forget this idea of starting at the top and being a member of Congress or a member of the legislature and making decisions and trying to undo a past which was unjust and unfair and inhuman. Forget that. Let's at least take advantage of the opportunities that present themselves to us now. Let's agree that we will work with our neighbor and we will do all we can so that together we can experience the potential of a vibrant, exciting, growing South. Cast it down, again, this is directly from the text, cast it down in agriculture, mechanics, commerce, in domestic service, and in the professions. And in this connection, it is well to bear in mind that whatever other sins the South may be called to bear, when it comes to business, pure and simple, it is in the South that the Negro is given a man's chance in the commercial world. And in nothing in this exposition more eloquent than emphasizing this chance. We recognize, Washington is saying, that this is our best shot. He doesn't use the term at the American dream. Our greatest danger, Washington says, is that in the great leap from slavery to freedom, we may overlook the fact that the masses of us are to live by the productions of our hands, and fail to keep in mind that we shall prosper in proportion as we learn to dignify and glorify common labor and put brains and skill into the common occupations of life, shall prosper in proportion as we learn to draw the line between the superficial and the substantial, the ornamental gewgaws of life and the useful. No race can prosper until it learns that there is as much dignity in tilling a field as in writing a poem. It is at the bottom of life we must begin, and not at the top. Nor should we permit our grievances to overshadow our opportunities. This is the famous compromise that Booker T. Washington is so criticized for by many black leaders since then. And of course, at the time, the major one was W.E.B. Du Bois from Harvard University. And his argument was that Booker T. Washington sold out his race to the white. They bought exactly what he was saying, that blacks would start at the bottom and do all the menial jobs, etc. But if you read Washington carefully, if you listen carefully to what he's saying, the implication is, if you let us in, if you give us a chance, then we have every reason to believe that we will be able to rise to the top like everybody else. He is not condemning his race to permanent second-class citizenship, irrespective of what he's being accused of. But on the other hand, his white audience chooses to hear just that. One more paragraph, and then we'll leave this. It's 45 minutes after the hour. To those of the white race who look to the incoming of those of foreign birth and strange tongue and habits for the prosperity of the South, were I permitted, I would repeat what I say to my own race: cast down your buckets where you are. What he's talking about is the inclination of the white South to offer the jobs that are available to immigrants rather than to African Americans who are already there. What he is basically appealing to the white South on is to allow economic good sense to dictate what they do, not racism. What he is suggesting is it is the greatest mistake you will ever make to ignore us and to give the opportunities to people from other cultures and other nations just because they happen not to be black. This may be one of the most important points of the entire speech. Cast it down, cast your bucket down, among the 8 millions of Negroes whose habits you know, whose fidelity and love you have tested in days when to have proved treacherous meant the ruin of your firesides. When we were slaves, we were in your households. We were within your families. We were intricately involved with your children. If we couldn't be trusted, we could have done damage there, but we didn't. You can trust us, is what he's saying. Cast down your bucket among these people who have, without strikes and labor wars, tilled your fields, cleared your forests, builded your railroads and cities, and brought forth treasures from the bowels of the earth, and helped make possible this magnificent representation of the progress of the South. Casting down your bucket among my people, helping and encouraging them as you are doing on these grounds, and to education of head, hand, and heart, you will find that they will buy your surplus land, make blossom the wastelands in your fields, and run your factories. While doing this, you can be sure in the future, as in the past, that you and your families will be surrounded by the most patient, faithful, law-abiding, and unresentful people that the world has ever seen. As we have proved our loyalty to you in the past, in nursing your children, watching by the sickbed of your mothers and fathers, and offered following them with tear-dimmed eyes to their graves, so in the future, in our humble way, we shall stand by you with a devotion that no foreigner can approach, ready to lay down our lives if need be in defense of yours, interlacing our industrial, commercial, civil, and religious life with yours in a way that shall make the interests of both races one. In all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as fingers, yet one as the hand in all things essential to mutual progress. That, in essence, is Booker T. Washington's appeal to the industrial South in 1895. It's very obvious as we look back on history, of course, looking back, history is 2020. Everything in the rearview mirror is 2020. It's very obvious that the white South chose to hear in Booker T. Washington's speech what they wanted to hear. They heard the compromise part. They refused to buy into the opportunity part that was associated with it. And the process of segregation, and ultimately it phased into what we know as Jim Crow in the early 20th century, continued to engulf the South. The South made the decision to allow race to be preeminent over the economic future of the South. For the first half, up until World War II, the first half of the 20th century, the standard of living in the South was markedly second in every conceivable way to what was happening in the Northeast and the northern parts of the United States. The South school systems were inferior. Their industrial system never developed as they could have. The wages never reached the levels that they did in the North and the East. The skill developments were less. And in part, the reason for this is because the South took on the responsibility of maintaining a dual system based on race. Dual systems of transportation, education, housing, and everything else. And they got permission to do it from the Supreme Court of the United States in 1892. The white leadership of the South chose a second-class quality of life standard of living in order to preserve the racial separation that existed prior to the Civil War and that they wanted to continue after it. It is ironic that after the Second World War, the economic development of the South became so attractive to the North because the development of the North happened with union development, with collective bargaining. The quality of life that we know as middle-class America is a product of the Industrial Revolution. It is a product of the advances that organized labor brought to the table for working people in this country. It is a result that did not happen in the South. And as a result, after World War II, corporate America began to look at the South once again as an opportunity for it, not for the South, for it to break unions by moving industry to the South in order to break the power of unions. It is very obvious that one of the issues Howard Zinn speaks of, I go back to a program that we did last week, and I was mentioning a luncheon that I had with a friend who reminded me in a course that I took, that she took with me years ago, that I had used Howard Zinn's book, and in it I had talked about the extent to which the power structure in the New South maintained itself by playing the race card between ex-slaves, between African Americans and poor whites in the South. Segregation and Jim Crow to follow were merely the follow-through for racial policies which were designed principally to make sure that poor whites and African Americans in the South never were able to unify. As long as the two were pitted against each other for their own best advantage, the power structure in the South remained unchallenged. I would suggest to you that that very same program, that very same strategy occurred in the North in the relations between industrial labor and corporate America in the 19th century in what becomes the Industrial Revolution. Those in power have everything to gain and nothing to lose by finding ways, sometimes real, sometimes trumped up, sometimes artificial, to pit one group against the other in order to prevent the kind of unification which would threaten their positions of unchallenged power. It goes back to the scheme that James Madison laid out in Federalist Number 10 and in Vices of the American Political System when he talked about factions. The security and stability of American government, Madison suggested in Federalist Number 10, is based on the ability of pitting interest group against interest group, faction against faction. In Federalist 51, he used the term ambition versus ambition, group against group, faction against faction, interest group against interest group. And the result is, if they are pitted against each other rather than allowed to cooperate with each other, the result is stability and security. I would suggest to you that what Booker T. Washington is proposing to the white South in 1895, I, here at the Virtual Center for the Study of the United States Constitution, we here at the Head On Radio Network are proposing the same kind of a deal in codetermination. If American working people can begin to see their own interests and begin to realize the extent to which their own interests can be brought to the table in order to bring the kind of quality to the manufacture and delivery of services and instruction in the United States, then the United States economy will be able to successfully compete with competitive systems around the world. But if we persist in the exclusionary, divisive policies pursued in the past, when it came to the post-Civil War South, when it came to labor in industrial America, when it comes to the radicals and the conservatives, when it came in the 1980s to President Reagan's firing of the air traffic controllers, which was the beginning of the end for labor organization in the American economy as we know it. What it left American labor with is the option of trying to find the best deal possible for its own people. Only by seeing the common connection can this process be reversed. If we are able to do it, our economy will prevail, our middle class will flourish, our young people will have a growing economy into which they can bring their skills and their talents. But if we don't, then we can't expect the American economy to compete with economies around the world when we continue to operate on the assumption that only 10 to 15% of our people are qualified for real education and real skill building. If we continue to cast aside 85% of our population because they don't measure up to the standards that we have artificially set, there's no way in the world that the 15% at the top can continue to keep the United States of America at the top of the heap in terms of the economic competition with the world. In order to compete successfully, we need all our people. And in order for all of our people to participate positively and actively, we've got to basically go back to the drawing board and turn it around. We'll pursue this in our next time together.